Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this PGA introductory webinar. My name is Michael Abbott, and I am the Member Education Executive here at the PGA. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce our speaker, John Ross. John, are you there?
I am, Michael. Hi.
How are you?
I'm feeling a little under the weather, but I'm sure I'll soldier on through this. I've got a slight throat infection, I'm afraid.
Thank you for participating. It is appreciated. Just to give everyone a little bit of background information about John, he is a health and safety consultant and a safety trainer specializing in the golf industry. He actually spent 20 years as a golf course manager, qualifying as a master greenkeeper, and prior to that spent 10 years in the catering industry where he worked as a chef in some of the UK's finest dining establishments. John is now qualified in safety law and management, and with his background he is kind of rather uniquely qualified and positioned from a golf industry perspective. John's here with us today to talk about his seminar, Health and Safety, What You Really Need to Know, which is part of our member education program here at the PGA, and hopefully he can give us all a better idea of what will be covered on the course. So John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Well, first of all, do you really need to do this training day, and do you really need to know the subject matter? And the answer is of course you don't. You're not aware of the laws that govern you, and you don't have to be. And they don't really affect you until they actually affect you. But by attending this training day, you will have a much clearer understanding of what laws do affect you as an occupier of property, as a tenant of a building, as a manager of people. You'll have a much clearer understanding of how the law can affect you and what your duties are under those laws and how you can manage those duties. We're all aware that the golf industry is fairly unique. We're all aware that people go on the golf course and put themselves at some sort of risk. We're all aware as managers that we're managing people and we're asking them to perform tasks and we're issuing instructions. And when we take on that form of responsibility, we are governed by laws. If we have an understanding of how those laws work, and if we have an understanding of how they can be used by us and against us, then we're in a much better position to manage them. So I've put together this training day, which is based on the laws that really affect the golf course manager, the golf clubhouse manager, and the laws that affect the people that visit golf courses. We're going to do it in a very formal manner. We're going to look at the structure of law. We're going to look at the criminal laws, at the civil laws, and at the common laws. And they're all very different. How they can be used against us is very different, and how they can be used by us is very different. In fact, some of those laws can't be used by us, they can only be used against us. However, they do all affect us. If we have a look at criminal law, we're looking at the laws that govern the individual against the state. Now, you may think that doesn't affect you, but in fact the largest one there, in terms of you being a manager, is the Health and Safety at Work Act. That is criminal law. And we can look at civil law and how civil law affects us. Now, civil law governs every single one of us every single day because it's our duties to each other. And civil law covers the laws that govern the individual against the organisation and the organisation against the individual. And these are used all the time. These are used all the time. Civil law can be in numerous forms. It can be in statute form or it can be in precedent form. And it's important that you understand which civil laws really do affect you. The main one is the Occupiers Liability Act, which I'll talk about in a little while. And the Occupiers Liability Act has been used recently against the golf course. So it's important that you understand as a manager, or as a golf pro, or as someone that's sending people out onto the golf course to play golf, or someone that's promoting golf on your site, because by promoting golf you're inviting people to play. And it's important that you understand what the Occupiers Liability Act is saying about the people you're inviting onto your premise. It's also important that you understand what the Occupiers Liability Act says about people you don't invite. However, they do come to see you. An example of that would be a sales rep. Or an example of that would be a member of the public that comes to use the bar. Or an example of that would be a trespasser, a child jumping over the fence to go and play in a bunker. These are all covered by the Occupiers Liability Act. So by understanding that act, you'll have a clearer view of how to manage your duties and your responsibilities. And then we can look at common law. And common law is legal precedent. And there's a crossover between common law and civil law, and we can see how they affect each other. Common law is very interesting. And once a legal precedent is set, it stays on statute, it stays on the books. And the judges will refer back to it through time. And this also has been used recently in the case that involved a golf course, where the judge referred backwards in time to legal precedent. It's a very interesting subject, common law. And it's very interesting if you can get inside the mind of a judge and see how he uses legal precedent to reach judgments that affect the modern day. Once we've looked at the legal structures, we'll look at your duties. You'll have a clearer understanding by this stage of the law, and you'll have a clearer understanding of what your duty is. And then we'll look at how you prove that you've satisfied your duty, because this is all set in legal precedent, how you satisfy your duty, how you prove you've satisfied your duty. But there's also the other side. If someone is claiming that you've not satisfied your duty, that you've been negligent, what do they need to prove to build a case that says you were negligent? And there's a very structured way of doing this. And like I say, once again, once you understand how it works, you'll be better able to manage your duties and your responsibilities. You'll have a much clearer understanding of what your undertaking is. It's not as difficult as it seems. It really isn't. And when we've looked at your duties and how you satisfy them and how you prove them, we'll have a good clear look at the Occupiers Liability Act. Because the Occupiers Liability Act is a very important piece of law. It tells you very, very clearly how you look after your guests, those you've invited and those you haven't invited. And we'll look at how you restrict that invitation. How you restrict the invitation is very important, because once you invite people onto your site, how then do you instruct them where they're actually allowed to go and what they're actually allowed to do? How do you restrict their duty is a very important piece of legislation. And we'll have a very good look at that. And once again, like I say, throughout the whole thing, it's about clarifying the matter for you. It's about clarifying for the manager how he manages his duty. We're going to remove the woods. We're going to remove the undergrowth from the woods so that you have a clear view actually of what your path should be and how you manage your duties. Towards the end of it, we're going to lighten things up, because I think it's important that this could be a very heavy day, actually. So we're going to finish it on a light note, and we're going to look at what's called... Oh shit, I fucked up there, Michael.
Okay, well I can go back and edit it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, mate. I've really screwed up there. Can I go back one?
Yeah.
Right. We'll look at occupiers' liability. Mike, sorry, mate. I've really lost my...
Do you want to start again?
Yeah, you know what? Can I take 2 minutes just to... Like, I mean, I know there's only 7 of them, but I forgot about this one here.
That's all right.
I forgot about that baby. Oh, dear. Okay, let me start again, mate.
Start again.
Yeah, let me start again.
All right, can I just stop the recording and I'll start a new one? You won't see a difference, though. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this PGA introductory webinar. My name is Michael Abbott, and I'm the Member Education Executive here at the PGA. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce our speaker, John Ross. John, are you there?
Yeah, I am, Michael. Thank you. Hello.
How you doing?
I'm feeling a little under the weather. My voice is slightly hoarse, but hopefully everyone will be able to hear me.
Absolutely, and we do thanks for coming along and speaking this morning. Just to give you all a little bit of background information about John, he is a health and safety consultant and safety trainer specializing in the golf industry. He spent 20 years as a golf course manager, qualifying as a master greenkeeper, and prior to that, John, we worked in the catering industry as a chef in some of the UK's finest dining establishments. He is now qualified in safety law and management, and given his background, he is kind of rather uniquely qualified and positioned from a golf industry perspective. He's here today to talk about his seminar, Health and Safety, What You Really Need to Know, which is part of our PGA member education offering. And hopefully he can give us all a better idea of what will be covered on the course. So, John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Well, the first question you're going to be asking yourself is, do I need to know this? It's law, it's safety law, it's Health and Safety at Work Act, it's legislation. Do I really need to know this? Well, the answer is, of course you don't. Absolutely not. You don't need to know this. However, whilst I was studying, and I studied for 2 years, I spent 2 years saying to myself, why didn't I know that? Why had no one told me that? And whilst I was doing my 2 years of studies, I was kind of subconsciously building these training days in my head, because this is stuff that you really should know, and it's stuff that will enable you to better manage your workplace and better able to manage your environment. So no, you don't need to know it. There's no duty in law for you to know this. However, by knowing this, you'll be a better manager. And the reason you're watching this webinar is because you want to be a better manager. You want career progression. Information is knowledge. And everything about this training day is information that you will be able to use to progress your career. So no, you don't need to know it. But as a result of knowing it, you will be a better manager. It's as simple as that. I spent 2 years saying to myself, why didn't I know that? And now I do, and now I'm quite happy to pass the knowledge on to you. So, we're going to start with how the law works. Because the law has a structure. Clearly the law has a structure. But there's more than one type of law. And they're all used in different ways. There's criminal law. And you may be sitting there and thinking, well, I'm not going to break any laws, and surely criminal law doesn't affect me. And surely criminal law only involves murder and stealing and assault and things like that. Well, in fact, it doesn't, because the Health and Safety at Work Act is criminal law. The Health and Safety at Work Act is statute law. It was read by the Queen. So yes, criminal law affects you. And if you understand the way that criminal law works and what you have to do to satisfy your duty, you're a better manager. You're better able to manage the duties that are in front of you. And then we'll look at civil law. And civil law is completely different, because civil law is used by the individual against an organisation. The state doesn't get involved. And civil law is also used by an organisation against the state. Sorry, an organisation against the individual. And once again, the state doesn't get involved. However, there's a very clear structure to it. Civil law affects golf courses all the time, because when there is a claim against a golf course for being struck by a golf ball or for falling down a pothole, it's civil law that is the basis of that claim. So it's important that you understand how civil law works and what civil law is saying to you. And then we'll look at common law. And common law and civil law have a crossover, and they work on something called legal precedent. Many of those precedents are ancient, but they still stand today. And in making a judgment in civil law and in common law, the judges will refer backwards to legal precedent. And the lawyers have lots of fun arguing about legal precedent and the interpretation of legal precedent. But when it comes to safety and when it comes to the individual, there are some legal precedents that are definitive, that once you understand them will clearly explain to you what your duty is. An example of that is Rylance versus Fletcher. It's a very, very interesting common law case that determined strict liability. Strict liability. Now that might sound like a very technical phrase, but once you understand it, you'll understand what the duty of the occupier is in relation to what he stores on his premise. So once we look at the legal structure and how law works, we'll look at what your duty is within those laws, within that structure, and how you satisfy your duty. In the eventuality of a claim, what do you say to the court to prove to them that you have satisfied your duty, or that you did all that you could to satisfy your duty? You did all you could to deal with what was reasonably foreseeable. And what does the claimant have to prove to show that in fact you didn't satisfy your duty? This is all very clearly laid out. And once you understand it, you'll be able to step back and say, did I do enough? Have I done enough? Am I doing enough? And when you can answer those questions, you're a better manager. This training day is about making you a better manager. Once we've looked at safety law, we'll look at the Occupiers Liability Act. What is an occupier? An occupier is anyone that's using land for a purpose. It can be a landlord, it can be a tenant. Those details will be laid out in the contract. However, every golf club is an occupier in one sense or another. And so is every golf pro that's running a pro shop. So what does the Occupiers Liability Act demand of the occupier? What does the occupier have to do to satisfy a duty to his guests? If you're promoting golf on a site, you're inviting people onto your site, onto your location. What does the law say about your responsibility to that person you've invited onto your land? And what does it say about those people you haven't invited? About the safety reps that visit you? About the members of the public that come to use the bar? What does the Occupiers Liability Act say about that? The Occupiers Liability Act is a very important piece of legislation. It's statute law that can be used in civil proceedings, and it has been used recently against a golf course. Then we'll look at accidents on a golf course. And what does the law say in relation to sport? How does the Health and Safety Executive, the prosecuting body for the state, feel about sport and accidents within the sporting environment? Has there been any recent developments within accidents in golf course? How did the judge reach the conclusions that he did in those developments? Did he look back to common law and legal precedent? I can assure you he did. Very interesting to look at accidents in the golf course. Very interesting to read a judge's ruling and see how he reached the conclusions that he did and where liability stood between the golf course and the golfer. Accidents happen in the golf course daily. And golf courses are regularly taken to court or regularly settling out of court. But once you understand the law and how it works, you'll be able to better understand what your duty is and whether you've satisfied that duty. It's going to be a fairly heavy day. It's going to be an interesting day. You will, by the end of it, be able to go back to your golf course and look around and to say, yes, I'm doing this, or no, I'm not doing that. You may at some point during the day feel that your brain is being scrambled. However, I'll do all I can to keep it as interesting as possible. And because it's going to be a heavy day, we're going to finish on safety myths. Because there are a number of them, we read about them in the press all the time. Safety myths. You have one in front of you. Children were banned from playing conkers in school. Absolute nonsense. Complete and total nonsense. No legal standing whatsoever for such a decision. So where do these myths come from? Where do these decisions and rules come from? Is there a need for them? In some cases there is. Another example of a safety myth was a coffee shop that refused to put boiling water into a cup of tea on health and safety grounds. A safety myth. However, it made the headlines in a paper, and everyone then spends time walking around saying, oh, health and safety, you can't do this for health and safety, you can't do that for health and safety. What a load of nonsense. So how do we spot a safety myth? How do we identify it? There's a very simple way of doing it. And once we know it's just a myth, we can get rid of that silly phrase that says, you can't do that on health and safety grounds. There's a lot of things you can't do on health and safety grounds. However, very few of them you read about in newspaper headlines. I hope you decide to take on the training day. I'm sure you will find it interesting. And I'm sure by the end of it, you'll walk out scratching your head saying, why did no one tell me that before? Just like I did. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's great, and thanks for taking the time out to speak with us today, especially as you're not very well, and also just for confirming what the offer is for your seminar. On behalf of all the PJ members who are going to view this, we really do appreciate it, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you here for a seminar in the future. For those PJ professionals watching this recorded webinar, if you do want to see John in action, don't forget to go onto the Member Education homepage and register your interest for this seminar. If you're watching this on YouTube, there is a link in the About section below, so just click on that and you'll be redirected to our website where you can learn more about John's seminar and also book on or register for the course. Before we end the webinar, John, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, Michael, like I said, I did spend 2 years saying, why did no one teach me that? I think it's important that we have an understanding as managers of how the law works. It does always amaze me when I go into a golf club doing a consultancy, and I was in a very, very large one, a very prominent golf club just 2 days ago doing a consultancy, that in fact people at the very top have very little understanding of how the law works and how the law can be used by them and against them. And on those occasions when I do say, well, actually it works this way or it works that way, they always just scratch their head and say, of course, it's as clear as that. So hopefully that's something we'll be able to establish on the day, and I really look forward to holding a seminar or two for the PGA, and I'm sure that everyone will benefit from it.
Definitely, absolutely. Well, John, thank you again, and as I say, we look forward to seeing you here for the seminar in the future.
My pleasure, Michael.
Cheers, John. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.